Welcome to ESA's water cooler chat on ecology education in year 2 of the pandemic, lessons learned, lessons applied. My name is Jessica Johnston. I'm an education program coordinator with the Ecological Society of America, and we're happy you're here. I'm going to just go over some brief Zoom housekeeping rules before we start this process and introduce David. But if you haven't been to a water cooler chat before, this is an informal discussion. We actually want you to participate. We want you to talk. We want you to chat. We just ask that you raise your little digital hand to let us know if you have a comment, and you're also welcome to have this conversation go simultaneously by posting comments in the chat box. Otherwise, just keep your mic muted so that we don't get all that crazy feedback. And I also want to let you know that we are recording today's event. So if for some reason you don't want to be on camera, please go ahead and turn off your video. But obviously, we want to see your faces. It's a nice 3-day weekend coming up for many of us. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion to kick off our great weekend. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to, oh, wait, I forgot. We have some upcoming education events. So there is a water cooler chat next week on managing and conserving plant biodiversity. This is going to be heavily focused on what botany is doing and what applied skill sets are needed to manage plant communities in national parks. That's a Scientists in Parks program. It's an internship program with national parks that we co-manage with the national parks. And we have some great panelists that just participated in a internship that are going to be talking about their experience managing and conserving plants. In addition, we have some opportunities for students. So if you're a faculty member, please share these opportunities with your students. You have the ESA's USGS Cooperative Internship for undergrads. And we also have Ecology Plus Mentorship, and we need applications for mentors and mentees. I will drop those links in the chat in a little bit, but just something to keep in mind. All right, now let's introduce David. So David is an associate professor in ecology at the Department of Biological and Environmental Sciences in Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania. He's the founding member and former vice president of the Ecological Research as Education Network, or ERIN, in which he led the collaborative project Turtle Pop. He's also a published author of short stories and creative nonfiction. 2 of these stories are associated with educational resources, which can be found on ESA's EcoEd Digital Library. So if you're not familiar with EcoEd Digital Library, I recommend that you go check it out. And he is actually the current chair of the ESA's education section. So without further ado, I'm going to kick this over to David. Thank you so much, David, for hosting, and it is all yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, hi everyone. It's good to see you, or at least seeing your names on a black background. If you want to share your camera, that'd be awesome. But of course, you don't have to. In looking at that picture that that Jessica showed with me holding a turtle, and I shared that, I realized I'm falling guilty of something I always criticize, like real estate agents doing, right? Where they always have this picture, then you meet the person and you realize the picture is like 20, 30 years ago. Wasn't quite 20, 30 years ago, but it was a few, a little older now, but it's good to see you all. So yeah, thank you for coming, and hopefully you're here, right? Because you want to share what you've been doing and hear and learn from your colleagues about how each of us have handled or have been inspired, right, to maybe change our approaches to teaching in this age of COVID. I'm hoping to try to foster more kind of like look on the bright side kind of thing, like has this inspired us to do things and for the better. And then, of course, there's always the downside. So feel free, if that's what you want to talk about as well, to mention that. I'm just going to mention one thing. It's more like content related, and then open Zoom up for further conversation. I do have some discussion points, just some ideas I have to to inspire or prompt discussion, but truly this is for all of us. So it's definitely not my show. So back in what was it? I guess it was the summer of 2020. Remember getting, preparing for class, and it was going to be, my school did a mix of, some, I'm sure, very similar to everyone else, some 100% remote, some in-person, hybrid at the same time, high flex, everything all at once kind of thing. And I was, concerned just how engaged my students would be. So I did something I don't typically do, but I now think it's a good idea, is over the summer, I emailed my incoming students, this would be for a 300 level general ecology class, and just said, hey, is there anything you're interested in learning about this upcoming year? Any, particular topics, or, just what do you want to learn? And of the roughly 24 students, one person responded, but at least one person did. And she said she wanted to know more about, surprise, surprise, COVID, right? And I said, that's fantastic. Let's look at COVID from a ecological perspective. And so I introduced a kind of a case study or section to the course on disease ecology, right? Which is not a topic I had ever taught before. So it was great for me to, learn. And now in the second year, I've kept that because I found it worked really well for a couple of reasons. One is bringing disease ecology into the class. It immediately appeals to people who aren't taking ecology because they want to be ecologists, right? It's a semi-required course at my school. So, students who are going to medical school, might have to take this course, and, having them think about disease from a different perspective it's a really good introduction to thinking about population processes, right? So students aren't used to thinking in population terms. So kind of gave us an advance on when we do talk about population ecology, getting them to think not in terms of individual health, but population health. Yeah, it also allowed them to think broader about what it is that ecologists do, right? So do a little like visualization exercise with students. It's like close your eyes and picture an ecologist, and where is that ecologist working, right? And the default is, usually a white person out there in some, pristine area on a mountaintop, right? And certainly that is part, right, of who we are and where we do work. But this understanding that, disease and the disease ecology, it's everywhere, right? Allows us to think about more urban ecology. It just really broadens the conversation and broadens the perspective, makes it really kind of inclusive. So I really appreciated my students' suggestion, and then just incorporating that into the age of COVID is just all the more fitting, right? So I used in my class, I've switched over for a few years now, have been using Symbio's SimText simulation as my kind of class textbook. And they had a module on epidemiology, which they've now changed the name to How Diseases Spread, and update it with COVID. So I had a resource there ready to use. So it was a really nice, for me and my students anyway, a really nice addition to the course. And so I hope to keep that going. Yeah, my plan is to keep that approach going. But that was kind of one positive, I think, that COVID inspired me to change things, change approaches a little bit. So, and with that, yeah, I'll open the floor, kind of following the example I just has the pandemic inspired any of you to add maybe different content or take a new approach to presenting some of the content, or different pedagogical approaches? Nope, everyone doing the same old stuff.
I guess I'll talk since nobody else wants to. It's Nate Rule. I'm at Rowan University. I've been busily pivoting all of my courses to be very flexible for instructional modality. So I've been, wherever I can, integrating flexibility into my course so that I'm not relying on a, it has to be an in-class, in-person activity. I've been trying to do activities that are amenable to any instructional modality so that I can reduce my own stress when it comes time to pivot to some other instructional modality as I have to. So I've been building that into my courses, and I intend it to be kind of a permanent thing for my courses, to have that ability to be flexible moving forward. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Do you anticipate, is there a any kind of pressure from Rowan to I mean, not necessarily to do that, but with the expectation that maybe you'll be having to teach like online courses in the future? Or is this, like, Nathan, are you completely realizing this is the best thing for you and how you want to approach your course?
There's a little bit of both there. The institution is moving toward having more online courses. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were talking a lot about, the administration was talking a lot about, remote is going to be the future, and we're going to keep doing this hybrid stuff into the future, and we're going to become a hybrid mega university. And they had great aspirations, but then like the realities of that, I think, crept in on them over a year. And I'm not hearing anybody talk about remote like this virtual stuff as being a superior method to being in person. I mean, certainly online has its uses, but this like hybrid on the fly business is maybe not as great as we thought it might be. But that said, I think it has its purpose, right? So when there's I think snow days are gone. We're never going to have snow days again, right? We're gonna just pivot to remote teaching when that happens, because it's better than not teaching. And I'm just trying to make my courses as robust as I can, so that I can maintain quality for my students and get a legitimate educational experience going for them on those days, and also maintain my own sanity moving forward.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments for Nathan? Or Nathan,
Right,
did you introduce yourself as Nate or Nathan? I'm sorry, I was again.
I'll go by either, but Nate's fine.
Okay, great, thank you.
So can I jump in then?
Go right ahead, Ken.
All right, thank you. So I feel compelled to provide some my own insights right here. Certainly, I've been doing what I've been doing, at least in terms of teaching, for over 40 years, and I guess I'm kind of set in my ways. But on the other hand, forced to do things differently when necessity struck. And so, one of the courses that I teach is a medical botany course. And so when I offered it over the summer, the students, by and large, wanted me to teach it remotely instead of teaching it face-to-face. And so basically, I recorded a whole bunch of lectures using Panopto as I use Zoom and then uploaded things to Panopto. And, I felt badly in the sense that I didn't get to see the students face-to-face. It was all done remotely, and according to the student evaluations, they loved it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm also teaching an energy course, and I have it all online, but I'm giving the students the choice of either doing it online or doing it face-to-face, or doing whatever however the heck they want to do it. And I just gave an exam. And so one of the things I really look forward to doing is to comparing the performance of the students who were doing it online with those who were doing it face-to-face My gut feeling is that there's either going to be no difference between the two, or the students will be who are doing it online are going to be doing a little bit better than the students who are doing it face to face. When if that were to happen, you know, if that is the outcome, I'm going to feel really badly. Yeah. But yeah, I think, you know, so one of the things, there are two things that I want to get out of this session. The first thing is that I think, as some of you know, I'm the undergraduate editor for the ESA Bulletin, and I'd really like to see a group of people get together and write an article for the Bulletin on this topic of what have we learned over the past 2 years, in terms of what works, what doesn't work, and where does the future lie based on our experience. So I'm not looking for volunteers right at the moment, but think about this offer. And in fact, David, if you would be so kind as to either collate the interest or help me drum up some interest, I think that would be appreciated. So that would be one thing. The other thing is, the other question is, how do we go about doing field experiences remotely? And I know that there is some wisdom out there in terms of doing it remotely, but doing field stuff. But I'd like to hear from people who have experience in doing that.
Okay, all right, thanks, Ken. I saw Jeremy raised his hand.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeremy Davis. The thing I wanted to share, the thing I've been thinking about, it comes a little bit from, I didn't teach over the summer, and we're on the quarter system. I'm at UW-Tacoma, and so I just started last week. And the thing that has struck me more than anything, we're a commuter campus, like Ken, some of the students have expressed an interest in staying remote. Well, my course in conservation biology that I'm teaching right now is an in-person class. And what I've been struck by is this sense, perhaps mostly internally driven, of just how important it is to make sure that the in-person experience is necessary. That is to say, everything I'm doing, I feel like we should be out in the field, for example, or we should be handling stuff, because at this point, I'm putting the students at some amount of risk. I am forcing them to commute in, another source of risk. And so that has actually been an interesting transition for me. And I see in the chat, a lot of people are using flipped classroom. And so I feel like this move towards flipped classrooms is going to derive not just from the need for flexibility, but student expectation that if you're going to make them come into class, that there better be a reason that they're in class and not watching a YouTube video at home. And that's just been my experience over the last first week and a half of my class.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, any follow-up to that? I mean, I think that's an excellent point, right? Making sure that, yeah, the high quality of that in-person experience. Yeah, it's a tricky proposition, right? We want to be able to arguably replicate virtually, but knowing that it shouldn't be quite as good, right? Which we want them in person. Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. Patty, I saw that you're using a flipped approach. Was that primarily, I mean, I assume for lecture, or does it have a lab aspect to it as well?
Well, we were partly in person. We had choices, but we had reduced in-person time with each individual student. And that meant that I had to find ways to make that time count as much as possible, both to sort of engage them and to maintain a relationship with them. And that meant that I finally flipped. So that meant I videoed my lectures. I narrated PowerPoints and then uploaded them to my YouTube channel, all this stuff. Because that was the part that was the most passive, and I wanted the classroom to be more active learning. I've been moving in this direction for years, but this was the excuse to finally go full flip. And I'd say, I mean, there were definitely some strengths and weaknesses to the approach, but more good than bad, particularly in how well they respond to questions like new examples of things, and they are more engaged, the ones that survive. Real problem is it was still really hard to keep students going when so much of what they had to do was on their own time. And if they didn't do that, they tended to get lost pretty quickly. So that's been an ongoing effort trying to overcome that challenge. Yeah, sorry, long answer. I used a lot of the resources that you guys have mentioned. We had a couple of Symbio labs. Labs were a big deal, trying to figure out how to make everything potentially doable from home. And then because we were only in contact with half the students at a time, each two-week module had to have one in-person lab and one more computer-based lab so that 12 of the students could be working on their own time. I mean, there was basically 14 new labs first semester for my intro class. But I used a lot of the resources that are in the chat that others have mentioned, as well as a couple I put in there. So I'm grateful for all of those options.
Yeah. So does anyone want to speak to a particular remote field, either platform or activity that they felt was particularly meaningful and worthwhile? I know there's so much out there now, it's hard to, figure out which one it would work best for my particular situation. So if anyone wants to sell one of these things.
Well, I mean, I could jump in and do a little bit of selling for 4DEE, but we have Ken here though. So,
yeah.
I feel like I shouldn't be the one that has to sell that. But yeah, we jumped all over 4DEE at Rowan this past 2 summers ago. We jumped in on that, and what we did was we developed a cure it's a course-based undergraduate research experience that's integrated with 4DEE. So we kind of used 4DEE as a sounding board of sorts to kind of guide us in redeveloping our course and creating this cure. And we made this cure to be, customized for pandemic learning. It's robust to what we're currently experiencing because we made it during the pandemic. Of course, I can't share all the details of it since we haven't published it yet, but one of the things that we did was create our own instructional method, essentially, in order to adapt to these, novel teaching challenges. But 4DEE was, very important in helping us do that. So thanks for that, Ken. And anybody else that might be involved.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you.
We actually do have a publication coming out hopefully soon in Ecosphere about that. So you guys can read more about that there.
And Nathan, when you said how many professors were involved with this?
Yeah, so that I was the leader of it at our institution. And I had a committee of I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 faculty that worked with me on it. Basically, we all sat down, that everybody that teaches our introductory ecology course sat down. We were like, we are in trouble. Like going into the pandemic that first summer, we knew we were in trouble for the next school year. So we all knew we had to do something. And so we sat down and we sorted it out that summer and came up with a plan, and let the literature guide us in doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's whenever you get that many people, that many chefs in the kitchen, it can get a little crazy, right? So
yeah. I mean, certainly we had no idea of the pandemic when we put 4DEE together, and it's interesting to see how you guys at least were able to take the framework and run with it and help it solve a problem that we just simply didn't anticipate.
yeah, I mean, if nothing else, it ended up being a sounding board for us to, whenever we disagreed about something, it was like, well, the guys that, the folks that did 4DEE, they said this thing was important, and so we should really be focused on that. And I think what it really came down to for us, and maybe this is true for you guys when you were actually developing 4DEE, there's 2 schools of thought, really. There's the school that says, okay, we are hardcore ecology, we're only interested in ecology, and then that is exclusive of humans. And then there's another camp, which is we're interested in all species interactions to include humans and how humans are interacting with other biological communities, et cetera. And, we're interested in the big picture. We're interested in humans as well. There's a camp that says, no, humans are not part of that mix and have no place in an introductory ecology course. And there's another camp that says there is a place for that. And 4DEE stakes out pretty clearly that, humans are involved in ecology. And so it was, I think that aspect in particular was important to us in our internal deliberations. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm curious how many have, in how you've had to adjust, say, a general ecology course, is your experience similar to Nathan's, where there's actually, several, I think he said 6, 7 people involved. I know me personally, I'm the only official ecologist, so I just, the burden is on me, but then I only get to argue with myself, right, which is fun. But yeah, if anyone wants to speak of your personal experience with that. Right. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if being on your own makes change easier, or is it makes it more difficult because you're just kind of constrained to your own way of thinking. Or we don't have to talk about that one at all, so that's fine too.
You're trying, David.
Yeah,
I want to dominate the conversation, but it's really
oh, that's what Jersey people do. No, I'm sorry. I'm from Jersey, so I have to say that. Sorry.
It's really hard working with others sometimes. And a lot of times it's easier to work by yourself, like in terms of getting things done. So, it can be difficult. But when you work by yourself, you don't get as many interesting insights and innovations. So, I think working as a group, you get a much better end product than you get when you work by yourself sometimes, but it's definitely more labor intensive to work with and to work in a group.
Yeah, but thank you for that. So I'm curious, when people are saying they're doing hybrid, this isn't, I just want to make sure we're all like on the same page by what that means. This is, right, because sometimes hybrid means like labs lecture remote, labs in person, or the whatever the high flex, right? Like everything all the time. So yeah, Mary Beth. Saw your hand raised.
Sorry, yep, I did. I'm just like trying to find all the things, buttons. So hybrid, at least my understanding and interpretation of it is that you have a portion of your course asynchronous, and then you have a portion of your course in person. And that's what I did for actually several of my majors classes last year. And it worked out fantastic, and I'm staying with it. It's fantastic. And actually people were talking about, working in groups or working alone. For me, I just took everything that's been stewing around from picking up from all my peers over the last, 8 years of working in ESA and Aaron and all that stuff. And I just kind of took all that knowledge and I was able to translate that into my class. And also we had a lot of support. So we could not do a hybrid class or a total online asynchronous class unless we get it approved. So we had to have at least, if it were a hybrid class, you had to have the entire structure of the class and you had to have half of the content all up there. So it was a heck of a lot of work, but it was also, I found it, I can't imagine trying to do that cooperatively with 6 other people. I think that would be challenging. But.
That's my point about a group, is that the doing this stuff by committee is so much harder. I mean, when you can draw from resources that already exist, that's wonderful. But when it's 6 or 7 cooks in the kitchen, it's hard to come up with that meal. But boy, it's a masterpiece at the end. So long as it goes well, nobody puts in too much salt.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that with our particular situation, I think it sounds similar to Patty's, that we had lots of different options floating out around. Like I think our college did absolutely everything right last year, like way better than any other local colleges. This year, not so much, but last year they were fantastic. So if you, wanted to do your course all online, you were able to do that. You could do it in person, except for quarantining, and you could do it hybrid. We also had tents. So like for my ecosystem ecology class, it's typically like 2 1-hour lecture periods a week and a 4-hour lab. So the equivalent of one of my 1-hour lectures was all asynchronous. And then I had the field lab, which we typically did in the tent. And on Wednesday, on the second 1-hour, I typically Zoomed in where I gave them quizzes, and then we did, in-class activities and breakout groups and stuff to try to reinforce issues that had come up in the quizzes and the other sections. And it worked out. I'd have to say it worked out really well. It was great because I got to see them in person twice a week. So I was able to change if I needed to address issues that were coming up. Oh, one other thing is that I also think that it has helped with all my teaching. I mean, it was as much work as it was. I've got a lot of experience now trying to do all that upfront addressing of potential questions so that I could go out and do my river continuum concept lab in the field and not have, I had teams. We did a lot of pre-prep work. So students actually knew what they were going to do when they were going out there. Whereas usually I could wing it and I'd, be communicating, yelling to students, etc. And so this was, in order for it to be safe and effective, I had to do a lot more pre-prep work. And I'm keeping that. It's just helps in my opinion, it helps in terms of being much more effective and getting to all the students.
Great. Thanks, Mary Beth.
So
Patty?
Mary Beth, let me just jump in here. So basically what you're saying is that your lectures were online, but your labs were in person? Did I get that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. What if you were forced to do your labs remotely? What would that look like?
Oh, I would use the Aaron Neon flexible learning modules. So I was ready for those situations as well. And quite honestly, is interesting because we had set up spacing in classrooms so that we could avoid quarantining. And so initially, before the semester came out, it was 4 feet spacing and you didn't have to quarantine. Well, the health department changed when they got more information, and it was 6 feet. So we had a lot of students unnecessarily quarantining, ended up unnecessary. And so with those labs, sometimes I would take a video, I would Zoom with the students that were quarantining and that had COVID so that we could go through that lab, and then I would help them, and then I would make them go through the number crunching and analyses, and I just Zoomed with them to do that. And it was a lot of work. I don't recommend it, but you got to do what you got to do.
Patty, you have your hand raised?
Oh, yeah. No, I just kind of following up on, so the first year I had the students half of the time in the classroom, each individual student, because we had the group split in half. I definitely like it better now that all of the students are together. I still have them doing lectures remotely, but with more time in person, it gives us a little more room for activities and things and a little more work. I kept the lab prep that Mary Beth mentioned, having one block of time a week where it's all focused on getting them thinking ahead to the lab that they're going to do on another day, and any related skills development, practice with equipment, thinking about the concepts in some way or another. That has been really good for labs. And you can do follow-up as well during that time. So it puts a lot more emphasis on scientific process for DEE, and is in line with the book I'm using and books I'm using. So I like it better the second year.
Very good. Thanks, Patty. Bruce?
So I don't know how long I'm going to last, either in the bigger picture or on the Zoom call. But in the event that this lasts at least 30 seconds, I put a couple things in the chat. So during lockdown, I sent kids home, and I don't know, some of you may know that, we did the, the lightsaber for moths and talked about that last year, that kind of thing. And over the summer, this fall, I did something kind of interesting because some of the students, I have a student with disabilities, and I have other students, were diagnosed as, possible COVID exposed and were quarantined for 2 weeks. And so I was forced to do a hybrid for my intro bio class. So, I've got 3 sections and then a revision. So what I put in the chat was what I've done. I'm doing a stream study, doing stream surveys, and the students bring me the stuff from the kicknets, and I take a picture with my cell phone, and I put the photos up on a Google slideshow, numbered, and students who couldn't make it to class or can't go to the creek or whatever, inclusive pedagogy, they then get a bunch of slides to identify. And so you can see the first one, the Google slide one, has a bunch of photos from one of the sites. And, we actually are doing iNaturalist work to try to name these suckers correctly, at least get them to genus. And, there may be some ideas wrong. I'm still working on it. It's like talking like, right now it's live. And then students upload the information from those slides to a Google Sheet, which I also put in the chat. And then we have a sort of a morphological based taxonomy, like the aquatic isopod, we're going to call that. And then water quality code. And then what my students are doing now is presenting on, these frequencies of water quality, indicators at these sites that differ from like seriously urban Chester to really pretty rural, 5 miles away, Ridley State Park. and I've got a 26-year data set, you know, because I've been here a while. You're like Ken, doing the same damn thing. But I was there, so I know the data that's collected the same way. Anyway, so there are all kinds of ways that this photo thing, this is cool. Steal this, do this, because I don't kill stuff anymore. I don't need to. And the IDing is good enough on iNaturalist to get at least, you know, subfamily genus and morphotype. So so this is pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to working up some sort of a hosted repository of these kinds of data to where others who do this kind of work, you know, maybe we can make this, you know, a bigger kind of comparative project. And that's all pandemic. I wouldn't have done this had I not known I can't have people in the field. That's cool.
Thank you, Bruce. Glad you survived. Oh, I mean, wait, oh, you transitioned, you moved in my screen here, so I thought at that second your connection went. But the time
Well, I'm glad I survived too. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for that. It is, you know, the increased popularity and power of iNaturalist and you know, associated seek, the timing of that seemed to be perfect with the pandemic, right? It's really making us, and having really the positive effect of just getting more people outside and just interested in seeing the world around them and being more easily able to identify. Yeah, it's been wonderful. All right. So yeah, Mary Beth, you asked in the chat, can I send around a copy of the chat? And I don't know if I can, but Jessica, can we get that saved? Can we save the chat? And
Yeah, 3 dots at the bottom,
okay,
right above where you enter. I think it gives you,
thank
or
you. Okay,
even just a piece of paper, I think, the little
Yep.
paper icon.
okay, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, some
Oh.
great resources being shared back and forth right now. I can't say I blame you.
Yep. So we will get this out to everyone. Let's see. So Nancy, in the chat, you mentioned that you're on your own and your biggest hurdle is convincing non-scientists why something is important. I think we can probably all empathize with that. Do you want to speak to that anymore? Do you want to say where you are, your institution?
Oh, so I'm at Cotty College. It's a women's college in Missouri, and I think we're at 306 students this year. Last year we were down to 250. So we did a lot of teaching in person with masks on, 6 feet apart.
Okay. Yeah, and who are the students that you teach? What are their like intended career goals?
So they vary. So some of the students are just getting an associate's degree. Some are getting bachelor's degrees. I've had students who eventually go to med school or vet school in my classes too, but it varies. And then there's a fair amount from places where they grew up on farms, so they know a little more about the outdoors than some of the other students.
So has anyone found if any of these new innovations, I'm thinking like the one Bruce just mentioned with his new approach, is this increasing the appeal of ecology to students who might not otherwise be as interested in kind of traditional ecological studies? Because I'm sure we all do teach to a mixed audience. So Kaylin put into the chat.
Yeah,
okay, great.
That wasn't in response to your question. I'm just finally catching up to the conversation from a little bit ago. Sorry.
Right. No, but that's great. And I mean, it could be related, right? If students who felt they couldn't like physically do ecology as it's traditionally done because of some disability, if they now feel, you know, more included, right, because of how approaches have changed. So that would be
They have
but if
some
you-
cool labs where they've had students who are able-bodied take cameras or iPads to places and then have a partner who's on the corresponding iPad, you know, linked by video somewhere else and be able to direct each other. Like, hey, you know, I didn't see that invert that just came out of that kick net. Go back over to the left and show me that one again, or I'll count and you hold the net, or, you know, whatever.
Interesting. Yeah. And what is IAGD? Like, I'm just not familiar with the organization. I suppose I could click on it. Never
Yeah,
mind.
which is what
Yeah,
I have to
you
do
can
because I can never remember. It's International Association of Geoscience Diversity.
Okay. Okay, great. Yep. Thank you.
I was gonna say, I don't know of any specific things that target non-majors to get them more interested in, but I do know that like the 4DE, I'm on the working group for non-majors, and a big conversation we have is that, you know, you have to teach the students from the human dimension perspective to get them interested, that they don't have that inquisitive desire to like learn about nature that like most science majors do. And that they like, this is, I'm not an educator, but all the non-major educators that are in this working group usually say that they always have to come from that human dimension component first, how it directly connects and affects their world for them to have any real interest in why ecology is important or any of these labs are important. I don't know if that's of any help to you, Nancy, but, and maybe Nathan can speak to how he's implemented that fourth dimension of the 4DE, the human in environment interaction dimension. But yeah, I think that might be a good strategy to maybe get those students on board a little bit more.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that, you know, getting students to recognize the importance of ecology to whatever their career path is a ongoing battle. And one of the nice things about 4DEE is that it emphasizes that, like, you know, I think when it's properly used, it leads students toward an understanding of the relevance and utility of ecology. And I mean, 4DEE doesn't articulate directly, you know, the relevance and utility of ecology, but, you know, I think it's there if you dig a little bit. And from our perspective, here at Rowan, it's been a challenge too, not only with the students, but also with our peers in other departments and with admin, because, you know, we're outside of Philadelphia. It's a biotech hub in Philadelphia. It's a biotech hub in New Jersey. There's a lot of pharmaceutical stuff going on. A lot of our biology majors, you know, we're a biology department. A lot of them are planning clinical careers. And here we are putting every single bio major through an ecology class. They all have to take Introduction to Ecology. And so we get some grunts and groans from those students, and grunts and groans from, you know, other departments and from administrators that, you know, why aren't you getting rid of that class in order to streamline progression toward their degree? You know, they don't need that shit. And so, you know, we've tried to take a perspective where we really strongly emphasize, you know, why ecology is important to people that plan a variety of different career paths in the, you know, that are related to biology. You know, so I've been tying in COVID at every opportunity. I mean, there's no denying the importance of COVID and the pandemic to our lives right now. And there's so many ways to weave it in when you're talking about the basics of ecology. So I've been taking every opportunity possible to do that in my classes. But, you know, in a bigger picture, one of the things I'd say that was kind of an innovation in our development of our course the past year was really to take 4DEE maybe another step and talk about, I think we call them transferable practices at this point, where we're basically just trying to say, you know, every student that comes in, we're saying, look, you're here because you're trying to be a scientist. You're training to be a scientist. And this class is about training scientists. And we're going to train you to be scientists while we're teaching you about ecology. And you're going to see all the different tie-ins between ecology and the other disciplines of biology when you take this class. And so we just keep hammering them on that, about the broader impact of ecology on, you know, all these other aspects of their career plans. And I hope that by the end of the class, we've got them. But, you know, certainly at the beginning, there's lots of grumps and groans. I don't need to be here. This is stupid. I shouldn't be taking this class. I want to be a doctor. Why do I need to take ecology? You're going to know why in a minute.
I know personally, I'm experimenting this year. Our general ecology course at my college is a little bizarre. It's the lecture is a separate course from the lab course. So the lab is a standalone, and usually it's the same students, but occasionally something weird happens. Like this semester, I have a student in the lab who's not in the lecture, which is, I've never had that before. But so I have to treat them separate, and I'm experimenting a little bit with, you know, trying to address that. How is ecology relevant for students who aren't inherently interested, and trying to craft the labs and the questions in that ecology can be used to solve problems, right? So if we're, you know, are concerned about climate change, how can ecologists help address climate change, right? So that led to, you know, a new lab on carbon sequestration in soil, right? And putting it in the context of here is how we solve problems using ecology. I think it's kind of always there in what ecologists do, but I'm trying to put that front and center, right, more now. I don't know how well it's working. It's a work in progress, but I do think students, at least superficially, are appreciating that approach as to not you know, studying science just to, you know, learn, right? But can we use this to solve, you know, or at least help address big old problems? So it's one approach that I've been taking that was partially motivated by the pandemic. All right, in the final moments, there were a couple, there's a some chatter in the chat about research, right? So if you're interested, yeah, there's been some commentary on how and if your research program has been impacted. So if anyone has any comments, but wanted to point them out, make sure you're reading that if it's relevant to you. Okay, in our final minutes, just want to ask anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, if you would like to. Crystal, it's great to see you. Crystal was my former student, now a doctoral student at Nebraska. Great to see you.
I was just gonna second or third Bruce's comment about data science skills, applied sciences, especially I work directly with the MPS folks. We had 2 people earlier on the chat that are going to be hosting a thing next week. The SIP interns, these MPS is looking for highly qualified, skilled data science managers, and they're looking from these coming out of grad school, coming out of undergrad. So I was going to say, if there's any way to reshape any of your courses to include a little bit more of that, you know, finagling of those data skills, even if they're working with just sloppy data and learning how to clean it, which is something that we talked about at our last water cooler chat. And also something that I specifically had told the guest host, let's not talk about data cleaning because I don't think that's really relevant. And then there was about 20 minutes of conversation about data cleaning and how that was such an important skill to have. And that was something on my part that I didn't see as important. And so I'm just sharing that because obviously I was wrong. And that, you know, even if you're not a fantastic person with using R or Python, or you don't even use GIS in your class, but you're great at working with Excel, teaching students, you know, how to set up those spreadsheets, pivot tables, all of that stuff is actually really useful. And those are the kinds of things that the federal agencies are looking for when they're hiring. It's just something I've learned over the past couple of years that I didn't know I needed to tell students until recently.
Jessica, we have a project that's funded by NSF creating teaching materials to help faculty members teach computational skills using environmental data sets. So there are about 20 modules. There's going to be about another 20 coming out, but we also have paid spots for people to build new materials, and those will be starting in January. So if anyone wants to build teaching materials and have someone help them through that process and get paid for it, let me know, because we're recruiting and we would like to have more ecology in the next set.
Well, you're welcome to use this platform to recruit people. I mean, we can always host a water cooler chat basically about what skills the current people you have signed up for, what they have, and like if somebody feels like they meet those skills and they want to do it. I mean, because I think that there's a real need to prep the students that are coming out, because a lot of people don't want to do research. A lot of people don't want to do academia, you know, but they do want to work for National Park Service. They want to work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And these are the people that are managing huge data sets, just like NEON. And so they really need those skills.
So some of our materials have NEON data, and we just launched a set that have LTER data. So I think these are relevant for this group.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we're even recognizing within the national parks, the people that I work with, that a lot of the people who mentor the students for the summer programs, they're intentionally hiring students that are more qualified to do this stuff than they are. So they don't even know how to mentor them appropriately. So they hire these students, they go, oh, you have 2 years GIS experience, but really they've just got a GIS certificate, right, from undergrad. And then they go in and they're swimming in an ocean on their own, right? So they don't even have the resources themselves within the parks to help them facilitate these high demands, which is quite interesting.
I just wanted to throw in an anecdote in terms of ecology and its relevance. I've been teaching in my sophomore level ecology class for about 15 years. I take a couple of lectures on emerging diseases and pathogens and all of that stuff. And I would always lecture and I'd talk about it. And I started talking about pandemics, and I'd said, you know, we don't know, but you know, if you're an ecologist or you're an epidemiologist, you can make some predictions. You know, it could be anywhere, but most likely it might come from Asia, because a lot of our pandemics do. Probably come from moving from an animal, probably come from a coronavirus with a bat, you know, and I'd been saying that for years. And so now everybody thinks that, you know, first of all, that, you know, I was a clairvoyant, but more, they're like, wow, the ecologists really actually know something. You know, they actually know something useful that, you know, if we'd all listened, we might have been more prepared for.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for sharing that. Okay, and Jessica mentioned that this can be a place to plug something. So I'll end with a plug. As the current chair for the ESA's education section, we are lacking a chair-elect to take over the reins next year, right? So this would be taking over. The transition is at the ESA National Conference in August. So if you are interested in that at all, please send me an email or just like raise your hand, and I'd be happy to share information about duties. It's actually quite simple. It's nice having the support of ESA and the education folk there. So working closely, it's not too heavy of a lift on the part of the education chair. So shameless plug, but we need people.
Yeah, so reach out to David. David, maybe you should put your email in the chat.
Sure.
If you're ever going to get anybody, maybe they'll email you. But I do want to say, as we close out, thank you very much for agreeing to host this chat. I think this is needed, right? We always need to kind of like get ready and recharge, have these conversations about what's happening. There's been so many shifts in the education and pedagogy in the past year and a half. It's kind of mind-boggling. So thank you everybody for coming, and I think that's it, right? I hope everyone has a nice restful weekend or gets to play catch up on something that they've been avoiding for the past month, whatever your scenario is. And feel free to download the chat. We will, since this is recorded, we will post it on our YouTube channel, and it'll be available on the ESA's water cooler chat page. So that's it.
Okay. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.